guys, welcome back to Scott Family Homestead. Today we're working on a huge beef project. We recently picked up our steer that went to the butcher. It was a little bit bigger than we were planning on, and we ended up with more meat than we have space for. So we ended up putting a large portion of meat into our refrigerator to make shelf stable. And we're going to work through 5 different projects today to get all of this meat shelf stable. The reason we're so tight on freezer space is because we also brought home 7 pigs worth of pork, and my husband right now, as we speak, is off on his way to go get the last of the chickens. We had a batch of 50 chickens going to the butcher this week. We decided we had a few too many roosters, so we went into the coop at night and pulled all of the extra roosters out to also bring to the butcher, and it turns out we had 14 roosters. So about a dozen of those went, so we're getting 12 more chickens, and we just don't have the space. I want to say, first of all, thank you to everybody who has bought bundles from us this week. So we ran a special on chicken bundles, we had a beef bundle and pork bundles. They sold so fast, and so many of them, that we actually ran out of some of our beef cuts and some of our chicken cuts. So I want to say a huge thank you to those of you who are local and who purchased from us. We are absolutely overwhelmed with the support that we got this week. Selling all of those bundles made it possible for us to bring all these chickens home and have some freezer space for them. So that was a huge blessing for us. Every one of our freezers is full to the brim right now. We've got 4 where we can do all of our cuts for sale, and then we have our own personal freezers, and they are all full. So we're going to work on getting some of this shelf stable. You might be interested in this if you are also short on freezer space, or if you are interested in having ready-made meals and shelf-stable food that is available at a moment's notice. I'm going to show you what we have here so far. I have about 20 pounds of roasts. We've got different sizes. I did take some of the roasts that were kind of bulkier or had a different shape to them. A lot of these are packaged really nicely into like flat, and these are easier to store. So I took out a lot of the ones that were just kind of wonky, and we're gonna use those up first. I have 20 pounds of ground meat, and these are in these square packages, and we got somewhere around 300 pounds of ground meat. So this is just a drop in the bucket of that, and we're gonna get that shelf stable. And then I've got about 10 pounds down in front here. These are all of our beef bones. So this is everything we got with that beef. They still have quite a bit of meat on them, but we're also going to make broth with that. My plan for the roast, we're going to do 2 projects. One of them is a canning project. We are going to make beef stew. I also have a lot of potatoes and onions right now, so that's perfect. And I have a whole bed of carrots out in the garden that's ready to be pulled up. And so we're going to make beef stew with some of this. The other half is going to be a freeze dryer project. We're going to make beef tips. We're going to cook it all the way through with the gravy and all. And then we're going to put it in the freeze dryer, and those are going to be ready-made, just add water meals. And I'm really excited about that because we are planning to do more camping, hiking, backpacking with our kids as they're getting older now. And so having those ready-made meals, it's going to be cheaper to do it this way than to buy them at the store. And we have them in any kind of emergency situation as well. With the ground beef, we're going to can some of it just as ground beef, and then we'll have it ready to go. Dump out a jar of this, add some taco seasoning to it. You're ready for tacos or whatever meal you want to do with that. Spaghetti. I have done this with ground pork before. It's really quite simple. And so that should be kind of one of our quicker and easier projects. And then the other half of this is going to be made into chili, and we're going to can that up so it is ready to go. We're big chili eaters, especially in the fall, so I don't expect that will last too terribly long. But having those meals that are just ready to go is going to be super handy. I did also find a whole bunch more broth. If you watched my video of cleaning out the freezers in preparation for this, we canned up a lot of this frozen broth a few weeks ago, but I did find more of this broth as I was putting some of the beef away. I'm going to use this with the beef tips. And so all of this is going to be saved freezer space. None of it's going to go to waste. It's all going to be meals that we enjoy eating, that we like to eat. It's just made a little bit easier by having it ready to go, cooked and ready to be a fast food for us. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I've got my roaster oven here. We're gonna get all these soup bones opened up. We're gonna get those in the roaster, covered in water. I'm gonna be traveling tomorrow, so my plan is to let this go fully until tomorrow night. It'll be a little over 24 hours. I'll pull off any meat that's on there and we'll eat that throughout the week, this week. And then we'll take all of that broth and put it in the refrigerator overnight. And then the next day we'll remove any excess fat and then we'll can it all up. So this is a multi-day project as well as the freeze dryer project. So that's the other one we're gonna get started right away. We're gonna get these roasts cut up. We're gonna get our beef tips made. I'm gonna do those in the crock pot because I just don't have the time to babysit it at the stove today. So we're gonna go ahead and get all of this put into the crock pots. I got 2 of them going here. You can use any recipe that you would like for this. I will link the one that I'm using today. But the general method here is gonna be cook all of this meat in a gravy, and then once it is cooked down and tender, we'll cool it, and then we'll just pour it right onto the freeze dryer trays and stick it in the freeze dryer. I expect that will take a couple of days. I haven't done much meat. I have done beef liver and pork liver and chicken liver, and I know that that takes like a good 48 hours when you include the freezing time in there. So I'm gonna get that going as well and expect that to be done in about 2 days. And then we will address the ground meat. Whether I get to this today is still a mystery to me. So this I'm gonna put back into the refrigerator, and we will either do this afternoon if I've got the time, or we're gonna put this off until Monday when we're canning up everything else. It's not totally realistic to do 5 big projects like this all at once. This is really a time crunch thing for me, but I wanna show you each one of these projects, and you can take on just 1 or 2, or if you're like me and you're in a situation where you've gotta get this taken care of because there just simply isn't room, you can follow us through and do all of these at once. So today, this is 50 pounds of beef, and we're gonna have it shelf stable in the next 3 days. Okay, let's get started. Okay, first project, we've got all of our beef soup bones in here. Now, ideally you would roast these first, but we simply don't have the time, and they'll do just fine in the roaster oven, submerged in water. So I've got about 10 pounds of soup bones. I'm gonna add a whole bunch of onion skins and ends for flavor. You could do carrots or celery or whatever vegetables you like for this. This is just a frozen bag of onion scraps I have for my freezer. We're also going to put in a couple of bay leaves. These I don't grow myself, but I'd like to learn how. Not sure if it's just a simple plant to grow or what, but we'll throw some of those in there. I've got thyme. This we grew here. We're just gonna put the whole sprigs in there. So we're gonna just put thyme, parsley. I like the moss curly leaf parsley. It just grows really cool, and you get a lot out of a plant. And I'm gonna put just a little bit of sage. I don't like overwhelming sage flavor, but we're gonna put a little bit in there. And then we're gonna top this whole thing off with water and let it go for 24 to 48 hours. I'm really excited about this because we have really only had turkey and chicken broth for as long as I can remember. We bought a half cow probably about 10 years ago, and since then we very rarely buy beef. We've been raising turkeys and using that for our ground meat, and then we would occasionally buy beef from the store, but we're growing so much of our own meat here that we've been eating a lot of chicken and turkey, and then for the past 3 years pork, and so I just haven't had beef in forever. I've never canned up beef broth, and anytime a recipe calls for it, I use chicken broth, but I'm really excited for a nice, rich beef broth. Shelf stable, I have it ready to go. We'll can this a bunch in quarts, and then we'll do some into pints, because sometimes you only need a little bit. I'm just gonna do this on low. We're gonna start at about 200 degrees, somewhere between 200 and 250, and make sure it's not a rolling boil in there ever. but just a nice steady heat. And then this will be taken care of in a couple of days. A couple more things I'm going to add is a big handful of garlic cloves. These are all just cut in half. You could mince them if you want. I'm just going to put them in like that. And peppercorns, I'm just going to put a few on top. Now I'm going to set it and forget it. We'll come back to this later. I have 7.5 pounds of roasts right here. We've got 7.5 pounds of roasts right here. We're going to make these into our beef tips in the crock pot. First thing I'm going to do is chop all this up so it's like stew meats. We're going to season the cubes of meat and then we're going to brown them on the stove for just a little bit to get them started. We'll put them into the crock pot and then we'll make the gravy and pour over top. Alright, I'm going to do this since I have 3 roasts. I'm going to do it in 3 batches. Each of these is about double what my recipe is. So we're going to do the seasonings now. So I'm going to double my recipe for what I have in here. It calls for brown sugar, which I did not have on hand. If you ever need brown sugar though, you can make it at home. It's just regular sugar and molasses. So for every cup of sugar, you put a tablespoon of molasses. And then you can adjust that depending on if you like a lighter brown sugar or a darker brown sugar. You just add however much molasses you want. It takes a little bit to kind of stir it in, but then there you go, you've got brown sugar. We're gonna do salt, onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, chili pepper. We're gonna do about a teaspoon of each since we're doubling our recipe. Looks really good. Smells really good. Okay, I'm gonna get this in my skillet. All right, both my crock pots are full of the beef. I'm going to melt down this broth. What I'm gonna do here, I'm not gonna make it anything super fancy. We're going for quick and easy. So I'm gonna do this and just deglaze the pan a bit with the broth. I'm gonna add a little bit more onion powder and a little bit more garlic powder. I'm gonna pour that in on top of these beef tips. I'm gonna let it cook on low for 7 or 8 hours. And then at the end, when it's done cooking, we're going to add a little bit of a cornstarch mixture to it to kind of thicken up that gravy. You can do whatever thickener you want, or at this point you could do like a cream of mushroom soup or whatever it is that you prefer. You can make those soups from scratch. The nice thing about freeze drying something like this instead of canning, we don't have to worry about the density of it or the ingredients or the acid or any of those things. We can just make it how we like it to taste, and then throw it in the freeze dryer and it's going to be ready to go. We'll be able to rehydrate this with hot water and have it over noodles or mashed potatoes or whatever we decide to do. The bulk of this project is done and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, I likely won't have time today to do all of the beef stew, but since I already have everything out from cutting up those roasts, I'm going to go ahead and cut up all the rest of the roasts into a similar size. So I have 6 of these left, and we're just gonna get those all cubed. Next project, we're gonna do chili. So for this, you can use canned tomatoes. I'm gonna show you. This is the book that I'm using. This is the book that I'm always using. You guys have probably seen this before if you watch my channel. They have a recipe in here for chili. So with this, you can use canned tomatoes, you can use whole tomatoes, crushed tomatoes, diced tomatoes. I pulled everything out of the garden, green, mostly green. About 3 or 4 days ago, I had 90 pounds of tomatoes and I want to get those canned up. So it just makes sense to go ahead and get these peeled and diced and use them in our chili instead of using my canned tomatoes. So what I do, I just remove the core, I put a little X on the bottom. I'm going to dip it into some boiling water back here, peel them, dice them, and I will use that in place of the canned tomatoes. All right, I have got 12 cups of diced tomatoes. Now remember, I'm doubling this recipe. So normally it would call for 6. Next up, it's time to brown our meat. We're gonna do 2 batches of 5. I'm gonna do it in 2 separate pots at the same time and just get this done with. Then you're gonna add onion. It calls for 2 cups. So since we're doing 2 batches, we're gonna do 4 cups of onion. I'm gonna use my little slap chopper and just do a whole bunch of onion all at once. I love that thing. I'll show it to you and I will also link it. I use it all the time. So we're gonna do onions like that and then garlic as well. We're gonna do 2 cloves of garlic minced in each of these pots. All right, this is the tool that I'm talking about. You open this up and you've got a dicer in here, which is super handy. This is what pushes it through, but these also trade out. Like you can put smaller ones. There's some other pieces that go in there. And then the top, if you pop this out, this is a mandolin. So we use this to make hash browns, slice veggies. We make our potato chips with this, use the mandolin part, and then fry them on the stove. I use this thing for everything, almost daily. So, big fan. We're just gonna put our onions on here. When you have to do a lot of onions like this makes really quick work of it. It's kind of loud. We'll just do that until we've got 4 cups. All right, we're gonna drain off some of this fat. And I know not everybody likes to drain fat off of their meat, but in this case, when you're canning it, it is best to get some of that grease off. You will have a better seal rate. So we're going to, this isn't super greasy meat, but we're gonna get some of it off. Then we're gonna add our onion and garlic. All right, I've got all my onions. Now I'm going to swap this out. I'm gonna put the smaller one in, put our garlic through here. Now we've got all of our garlic diced. We'll put about half of this into each one. Okay, we're gonna combine these now, but I'm bringing out the big guy. Let's make it a little more chili than I expected. So, here we go. Now at this point, you're gonna season your chili how you like it. You can follow the recipe in the ball book, or you can start with a little bit less and then work your way up and make sure that it is a heat that you and your family will enjoy. I've said this before and I'll say it again, you should can things that you will eat, can things that your family likes. We love to eat chili, but my kids aren't gonna eat it if it's super spicy. So we're gonna work on getting it to the spice level that we want. At this point, we're gonna add in our tomatoes. We're gonna gently boil this for 20 minutes, and in that time I'm going to get my pressure canner ready. I'm gonna put a little bit of water in there and get my jars all set up and get those heating up in the canner as well, so we can put this hot chili into hot jars. And our canner will be nice and hot and ready, and we can start getting that jarred up. So we're getting there. All right, we are ready to jar this up. We're gonna do a 1-inch headspace. Wipe the rims with vinegar. That's going to cut the grease. It's really important that you don't skip that part. And then we're going to put on new lids and finger tight rims. And then we're going to put it in the pressure canner and we're going to process this for 90 minutes. I have some other videos talking about how to use a pressure canner and all the details and when you start your time and all of that. So if you're brand new to pressure canning, go back. I've got a whole canning playlist that you can look through. But for those of you that are familiar with it, we're gonna go 90 minutes on this, and it would be 10 pounds of pressure. For us, it's gonna be 15, just because of our altitude. All right, my canner is settling in. I'm going to start on these beef tips and getting them onto our trays because it needs to get on here and cooled. You could even put it on the trays and pre-freeze it, but I don't have the freezer space. So all you do is just spread it out on the tray. You don't want it to be taller than the level of the tray. So you just fill it up so it reaches the top there. And now we'll continue down and we'll use the other crock pot if we need it. I'm gonna get this in the freeze dryer. I'm gonna finish my canning project and then we're gonna call it a night. We are back. We are now on day 3. So yesterday I got to go to the Packer game with my dad. It was awesome. When I got home in the evening, I did can up about half of the broth into quarts. So I've got those all done. I've got 7 quarts, and I did not take the fat off of it because it was still hot. So you can see there's a little bit in there. I'm not too worried about it. They all sealed up great. Today I'm gonna do pints with the rest of this. This has been in the fridge all night, and so you can see it has some fat on it. I'm gonna remove that It just makes it a little bit easier to seal. I have these Azure jars that I bought on sale that are pints. And so we're gonna go ahead and can the rest of this up in pints and get that into the pressure canner. These ball jars actually were on sale at Walmart. I got these for $13.44 per case. Normally they're like $16.44, so they were $3 off a case, which is a pretty good deal on jars. And then last month, I think still for October, the Azure jars were on sale. And those were a good deal for the pint and a half and the wide mouth pints. I got good deals. So we're using those jars today. I'm gonna get this jarred up and in the pressure canner first. And then we're gonna start tackling the beef stew project, which is the bigger project today. That I have all the stew meat chopped up already. I need to chop the potatoes, carrots, celery, and onions that are going in there. And we're gonna do it in 2 batches of 5 pounds of meat each. It's the recipe from this ball book again. So each batch will call for 12 cups of potatoes, 8 cups of carrots, 3 cups celery, and 3 cups onions. And so I'm gonna start chopping all of these goodies. That's gonna take a good long time, but I can get that done while I listen to the pressure canner with this broth. So that's the next step. My other plans today include finishing up the freeze-dried food. So that's almost done. It's still running in the other room and it's got just a couple hours left. And it's looking really good and dry. That's gonna get put into Mylar, get that packaged up. I'm going to also can just some plain hamburger, and we'll do that by browning it on the stove and then putting it into jars and topping it with hot water. And that will be our last bit of this. And we're gonna have 50 pounds of beef, all shelf stable. And I'm really excited about that. I think by the end of today, we should have this completely done, keeping in mind that I'm also filming and doing some other things in here, and I was gone most of the day yesterday. You really could get this done probably in 2 days, but I like the way we've split this up so far. Once I take the fat off of this broth, it's gonna have to be warmed up to boiling, and I'm also gonna need some hot jars, so I'm gonna get all of that ready, get this jarred up, get the pressure canner going, and then we're gonna start chopping. I got 11 pints, so we're going to do a double-decker in here and just evenly distribute them. With your broth, you're gonna go 1-inch headspace. We're gonna process this at 10 pounds of pressure, adjusting for altitude. We do 15 here, 11 if you're on a dial gauge canner. And then quarts go for 25 minutes, but these pints will just go for 20 minutes. Start your timer after you have vented your steam for 10 minutes and have gotten all the way up to pressure. So we're gonna go ahead and start processing this and keep working on our beef stew. My broth just got done, so we're gonna let this come down to 0 pressure. I'm gonna brown about 5 pounds of meat, and I also have some boiling water going on the back here that we're gonna top off our stew. In my big stock pot, I have 12 cups of potatoes, 8 cups of carrots, 3 cups of celery, 3 cups of onion. We're gonna add some spices to that. We're gonna add the meat to that and top the whole thing with boiling water and bring everything up to a boil. And that's gonna be the stew that we put into the jars. The stock pot, we're gonna add 4.5 teaspoons of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, and about a teaspoon of dried thyme. That will make a 7-quart batch, and then we're gonna do that 2 times. We're gonna jar this up with a 1-inch headspace, same as the broth. We're gonna process it for 90 minutes, which is pretty much standard for your quarts if you have any kind of meat products. And we're gonna do it at 10 pounds of pressure, but adjusting for altitude, we're gonna go 15. If you're doing this in pints, you would do it for 75 minutes. Filled up that canner with stew, and we still have a whole lot left out of that batch. The book says 7 quarts, but I think it's gonna make closer to 10. So we're gonna go ahead and get another canner going, get this load of stew done, and start prepping the next. I got my first batch of stew done. We've got our second one going in these 2 canners. I've got one that is just coming down. It's all finished. This one's got about a half hour to go. My last project here, we're gonna get started. It's kind of late, but we're gonna try to finish this today. I've got 10 pounds of ground beef, and we're gonna can this into pints. About 1 pound fits per pint, or if you're doing quarts, about 2 pounds would fit. Very, very simple project. We're going to brown all this meat in batches. We're going to get it into hot jars. You top it off with either boiling water or hot broth. With this, similar to your other meat products, we're going to do 1-inch headspace, wipe the rim with vinegar. We are going to process this for 75 minutes for pints. If you're doing quarts, you're going to want to go the full 90 minutes. Let it steam for 10 minutes. Put your weight on and start your timer once you have reached pressure, and then let it depressurize naturally, and you can release the weight after it gets down to 0. So a pretty easy project. It's another one where you're just babysitting a canner, but for the most part, it's going to be a nice quick one other than the canning part, and this will be super handy to have when we want some nice quick meals. So going to work on this. Stew is coming out of these canners, and then the very last thing that we're going to do is take our beef tips out of the freeze dryer. They're just about done, so I should be able to get those into Mylar bags tonight as well. And then I will do the grand reveal tomorrow morning once I have all this stuff cooled down and out on the counter, and you can see our 50 pounds of beef all shelf stable. After we get this browned up, one of the things you're going to want to do is drain off the excess fat, just like our other meat products that we've done. I haven't had a huge issue with leaving a bit of a fat cap, but if you have a lot of fat, depending on your beef or your pork or whatever meat you are canning up, you're going to want to drain some of that off. All right, our freeze dryer is done. It took about 48 hours, including freezing time, because I did not pre-freeze. It made 4 of these trays, and then we had enough to make 1 more tray. But I have the older medium HarvestRight, and so I only have 4 trays. But if you have the new HarvestRight freeze dryers, mediums have 5 trays, so this recipe would work perfect for that. You'll see that when they dry, they shrink down quite a bit, and you can kind of shift them around. It's just a really nice dry gravy. Got these ready to go. I've got oxygen absorbers, and then I've got this all warmed up. This is ready to seal my bags. What I like to do is use one of these spatulas and just break it into chunks. You can see that meat even is really nice and dry. Breaks apart. So we ended up fitting about 2/3 of a tray into each bag, so I made 6 meals from this. We're going to put our oxygen absorbers in and then seal them up. Once I open up a pack of these, I try to use up as many as I can, and then we'll seal this right back up to save the other ones, because they come in packs of 10. Okay, here it is. This is 50 pounds of beef, all shelf stable. I'm going to go through what we got from each of our projects, starting with the beef tips that we put through the freeze dryer. I got 6 Mylar bags. We also had beef tips for dinner one night because we had leftovers. Like I mentioned, if you have the new medium HarvestRight, you could have fit it all in there. It probably would have made about 8 of these Mylar bags. Next up, we've got our broth. We got 7 quarts and 13 pints of beef broth from all of those soup bones. And then I also got an 8-cup container full of shredded beef that we'll eat later this week that I pulled off of all of those soup bones. I got 7 quarts of chili, and I used my own homemade chili seasoning in this, so I'm really excited about that, from peppers that we grew in our high tunnel. Those are going to be great meals. I got 18 quarts of beef stew. Now these I struggled with a little bit more because some of them siphoned a bit. I lost a couple inches of fluid in a couple of these. We're going to eat those right away, but otherwise they look really good. They're going to store just fine as long as they have more than 50% of the jar has liquid in it, which most of these are only missing maybe an inch. These are going to be just fine. If you end up losing more of your liquid than half the jar, you're going to want to eat those right away. The thing that causes siphoning is I may have overfilled and not had enough headspace, or changing temperatures quickly. They're going to be a little bit messy to clean up, but otherwise they are perfectly good to go on the shelf. So I have 18 jars of that. We did have 2 that siphoned a little bit more that we ate last night for dinner. So from 10 pounds of the stew meat, or the roasts, you can get about 20 quarts. The last thing we did was our 10 pounds of ground beef into pints. It did actually make 13 pints. I had one. These are those Azure jars with the superb lids. I don't know if it's because of the brand of the lid or what, but I did have one buckle on me. So we're going to be eating that one right away. But we have 12 going to the pantry shelf from our 10 pounds of ground meat. So the quick rundown, we used 20 pounds of roasts for the beef tips and the beef stew. We used 10 pounds of soup bones to make all of this broth. And then we've got the pulled beef that we pulled off of there. And then we used 10 pounds of ground meat for the chili and 10 pounds of ground meat for our hamburger that's all cooked up, ready to go over here. So overall, we used 50 pounds of beef out of our freezer. I saved all that space, and now we have all of these ready-to-go meals for our pantry. So if you are short on freezer space, it is no problem. You could learn how to can, and you could put all of this up and have it easy and accessible, ready-to-go foods. This was a big project, and I condensed it down into a fairly short video. If you have any questions of something that I didn't cover or questions about the recipe, leave it in the comments. I'd be happy to continue the conversation. I am super happy with how this turned out, but I will say it was a pretty extensive 3 days of work. If you have a friend who can help you out or knows canning, that would be fantastic. This is a really good project to work through with a couple people and maybe split what you get at the end. It was a very, very big project, but I'm so happy to have it done. All of this is going on the pantry shelves, and we'll be so happy to eat this throughout those winter months. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I hope you are subscribed. Go ahead and push that little bell so you get notifications when we've got new videos. We've got lots to come, and I'm so happy you are here. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye, guys.